It's exactly 9:27. Welcome back to the second hour of News and Views on Salam Media with me, Julie Ali. And we are now going to be talking once again about Mpox. A couple of weeks ago, when we started talking about it, the Center for Communicable Diseases, at that point we were told nothing to worry about at all. And I think last week, the figure of known cases in South Africa stood at 24. But there seems to be deep concerns regarding an mpox outbreak, and this is at government level. So let's hear what Professor Helen Rees, the board chair of the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority, has to say about mpox. A very good morning to you, Professor. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Thank you indeed for your time. I do know that you're really very, very busy and stretched, but we would appreciate your input on this matter. I understand that in government circles, there seem to be talks in the corridors that at some point in the near future, there might even be some sort of a shutdown. Please, God, let's hope that's just a rumor, because I don't think not let alone South Africa, but I don't think any country in the world can actually afford another shutdown, even if it's just for a brief period.
Yes, well, I'm glad you told me that, because I also co-chair the Department of Health committee that's coordinating the response to mpox. That the issue of a shutdown has never been discussed. It's not on the agenda, and it's not globally on the agenda either. In fact, quite the opposite. When the World Health Organization declared a public health emergency, one of the issues that that allows us to do is to say, do we need to have shutdowns, yes or no? And how do we avoid them? Because we understand how devastating they are for countries and for economies, etc. So the answer is no. There is no discussion in South Africa or globally about shutting borders and shutdowns. Not at all.
Okay, I've just received some literature here regarding the department, and this is what they're saying, very much similar to what you have indicated. The government says that mpox is under control, but goes on to cite that COVID-19 pandemic, but cites that they urging caution regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. What's that all about?
Well, I can see why communities are becoming confused with all of these different. So let's start with COVID-19, because that was a pandemic, you'll know. We had the different variants that emerged, some of which, the Delta variant, for example, caused a significantly increased mortality, overloaded our health services. Everyone is familiar with that. COVID-19 is still circulating worldwide, but the variants that we're now seeing are not associated with this very severe disease across the population. But, people who are very elderly, in the same way as influenza affects people who are very elderly in a different way, it can be fatal. COVID-19, it's the same thing. It's a respiratory infection. And if you're very elderly or if you're immunocompromised, it can still be a challenge. This is the way of viruses, unfortunately. But we are watching closely, because we don't know whether in the future we will see a new variant of COVID-19 and then we see an increase in mortality. So that's just, mindfulness, and watching will continue. That surveillance will continue. Very separate to that is the mpox outbreak. And mpox has been around, was initially recognized in the West African region, two different types of mpox we call clade 1 and clade 2. And it was what we call an endemic disease. There would be occasional outbreaks. Those outbreaks were triggered in those regions from the virus jumping from animal reservoirs into the human population. And mpox was spread through contact. And that was limited, and it wasn't huge. But what changed was in 2022, we saw a huge global outbreak of mpox. particularly in the gay and bisexual male community, with over 100,000 cases. And that was worldwide, over 100 countries affected. And that is...
Professor, can you just turn around, please? I'm losing you there. Could you just change position if you don't mind? Professor, are you still there? You're breaking up. I think I can hear you now.
Okay, well, I hope this is going to work. Otherwise, we might have to redo it. I'll tell you why, because I'm in my home office at the moment and I'm going into work, but they're doing something with my internet.
No, I can hear you now. I can hear you now.
Okay.
So
I'll just finish off. So in 2022, we saw a huge global outbreak with over 100,000 cases and less than 1% deaths, but there were deaths. And that, had never been seen before. And this was sexually transmitted in the gay and bisexual male community. That hadn't been seen before. Prior to that, Mpox had been localized in a number of African countries and spread within households primarily. So we saw a change that this was now being sexually transmitted. And what we've now seen, particularly starting in the Democratic Republic of Congo, we're also seeing sexual transmission of Mpox into the heterosexual community. So what used to be a contact spread is now also being sexually spread. It's contact. It's just different types of contact. And that's what's alarming people, because we're seeing an increased number of cases in the DRC. And with travel being so open between countries, within the African region, obviously we're starting to see spread. There are now 16 countries affected, and there are now 3 additional countries internationally who've also detected cases of Mpox. But Mpox is spread through contact. It's not respiratory like COVID. So the fears that we're going to have some huge lockdown imminently is not being discussed anywhere. What we certainly want to do is stop transmission within cities and focus worldwide.
Okay, we understand that countries around the globe are, or very specifically the countries that have reported cases of Mpox, will be remaining on high alert in case of a surge in their Mpox cases, and also looking out for the emergence of new contagious strains. They go on to say that members of the public are urged to play their part in support the country's response. And in this case, it's our country, that's South Africa, our country's response efforts to prevent the spread of Mpox by maintaining non-pharmaceutical measures, including personal hygiene. That's the one part of the statement. Let's also look at what the World Health Organization has been saying. They've been working with nations worldwide to accelerate vaccine access and containment measures to curb the spread of the virus. So, where do we stand regarding vaccines? Who should be going out to vaccinate themselves? Is it going to be effective? What is the story around vaccines?
Very important question, and a very interesting story about vaccines. So smallpox and Mpox are in the same viral family. They're related. And the world eradicated smallpox in the 1980s. But up until then, we had been immunizing against smallpox, aiming to eradicate it, and the world was successful. But that means that older people received a smallpox vaccine. What we think we're now seeing is ongoing protection from that vaccine in older people against Mpox. But now we've, of course, got generations of people since 1980 who have not had a smallpox vaccine, and so they are not protected against Mpox, which is what we think we've seen. The vaccines that are available that the World Health Organization is recommending, there are 2 vaccines, and both these vaccines have been developed to protect against both smallpox and Mpox. So both of them are registered vaccines and they're known to protect. The problem is access. In the 2022 outbreak worldwide, countries that were affected, many of the high-income countries, bought up a lot of those vaccines and have them stockpiled. That means that there are very few vaccines for other countries to purchase, including the DRC, which at the moment has the worst outbreak worldwide. So because of this, there's been an outcry. Because what we're saying is, if you remember what happened in COVID, the African region was the last region to get access to COVID vaccines. Rich countries were hoarding them and stockpiling them, and we didn't get access until months later. So we're saying we can't do this again. If the world is committed to stopping pandemics and outbreaks, we have to share these very important technologies. So the World Health Organization, Africa CDC, and a big global alliance called Gavi, they're all working to secure vaccines, first of all from these stockpiles, but also from the manufacturers, so that we can get them into country. And in South Africa, we've been working with the WHO, trying to get access to vaccines for now well over a month. It's a slow process because the whole setup isn't designed to be globally friendly. And that's something in the future we'll have to rethink. But there is definitely a global effort to get access to vaccines and get them into countries, including here in South Africa. It wouldn't be for everyone, though. It would be for people who were contacts of somebody who's got confirmed Mpox. Could be household, could be a sexual contact. That they would receive them, but also high-risk groups. Of the 24 cases that you've mentioned in South Africa.
Okay, we've lost Professor Helen Rees. She has indicated that they're busy working on her internet at home, but I think she's answered most of the very important issues around the issues or the concerns raised on the Mpox virus. Professor Helen Rees is the board chair of the South African Health Products Regulatory Authority. And of course, the reason we're talking about Mpox yet again on the show today is there seems to be concerns in government circles about the outbreak of Mpox. And also, Professor Helen Rees has indicated another important factor, and that is the hoarding by the global north, the hoarding of Mpox vaccines, like they did with the COVID vaccines. And we're hoping and praying that it's not going to be the case this time around. Mpox vaccines are sorely needed in the DRC, and our government is trying to access a batch of vaccines for our most vulnerable citizens in South Africa. So that's the recent update regarding the Mpox. And we do know we've only up to now reported 24 known cases in South Africa, but that doesn't mean the number may not grow. But in the meantime, government is trying to source vaccines and then start administering them to the people that are most at risk and most vulnerable. And we will, of course, update the story as it develops. So thank you to Professor Helen Rees. I'm not sure if you're still there, but thank you indeed for your input on the Mpox vaccines, and we're going to leave it there. It is exactly 9:40 a.m. News and views on Salam Media.